Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, show number 402, episode 402, part 402. Well, there's 402 of the Skeptic Zone, including this one. I think you get the idea. For the 3rd of July 2016, Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia, the country with no leadership. As Australians know, we had a general election yesterday. And what a great day it was, because general elections in Australia are a lot of fun, especially when you turn up at the polling booth and there's a sausage sizzle. Yes, a great Australian tradition on election day, state or federal. When you turn up at the polling booth, there usually is a sausage sizzle, and I had a pretty damn good sausage with some mustard and some chilli sauce for $3.50. I think they should have more elections in Australia just to get the sausage sizzle. But the result of the election, nobody knows. It's up in the air. We don't know who's going to be the next Prime Minister or which party will be the next government. It's a bit confusing. I think we'll find out in a couple of days, but, as the time of this recording, we just don't know. But let's take a look at what's coming up on this week's show. We're going to kick off with our new reporter, Dr. Cassandra Perryman, with a little piece she's done about, well, what she calls mind woo. Woo when it comes to health products like homeopathy, which we'll be getting to later on in the show, or things like kinesiology, applied kinesiology, that is, we consider to be woo, largely chiropractic, aromatherapy, acupuncture, all this sort of thing we can look at as medical woo or physical woo. Dr. Cassandra is going to be looking at psychological woo, mindfulness, colouring books, life coaches, breathing, this sort of thing. A short report to kick off the Skeptic Zone with Dr. Cassandra Perryman, who's just getting over a bit of a cold, I think, at the moment. And we look forward to more reports from her coming up. Then after that, a blast from the past, the long ago past, the early part of last century, Sherlock Holmes. The 1930s, 1940s, Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce, Sherlock Holmes series of movies. I'm going to play a clip from one that demonstrates quite clearly that Sherlock Holmes was a very good skeptic. Oh, yes. Despite coming up against various, supernatural bits and pieces, it turns out, well, at least in the movies anyway, Sherlock Holmes was a skeptic, and I'll play the clip to prove it. I think you'll get a kick out of this segment. Then following that, it's a piece by Tim Mendham from the Australian Skeptics, read out by me, about concerns around a chiropractor referring patients to a fake gynaecologist. And don't forget, you can get a wealth of information, reports at skeptics.com.au, the website of Australian Skeptics, including free to download all the back issues of the journal The Skeptic. And I have the latest copy right here in my hands. It's pretty good. The Skeptic, Volume 36, Number 2 from June 2016. Science, Booze and Goons, it says. The main feature is about protecting consumer rights. Great magazine, one of the oldest skeptical journals in the world. And you can read all the back issues, download and read all the back issues for free at skeptics.com.au. And I encourage you to subscribe. In fact, if you subscribe, you can choose whether to get the physical copy, which I have right here, or indeed you can get the electronic copy, or both. But check it out at skeptics.com.au. Then to wrap up the show, a concerning story about homeopathy and pets. Homeopathy can kill pets and should be banned, says vets. A story read out to us by our dear friend Lauren Cochrane, and that'll be followed up by another report from medicaldaily.com referring to another video about homeopathy, which I will link to in this week's show notes. But before we get stuck into the show, check out maynard.com.au for the latest Bunga Bunga podcast. We have Tim Ferguson. It's all about the Supernova Science Fiction Fan Festival here in Sydney. It's a huge effort by Maynard to put all these interviews together. He was running around with his microphone interviewing everybody twice, I think. But there's a video which accompanies this week's Bunga Bunga, so check that out at maynard.com.au. It was a lot of fun. I was there making the video, and what a lot of fun we had. I think you'll enjoy it. Maynard and I are also looking forward very much in August. In August, we're going to be performing the Mystery Investigators show that we do every year for schools, and this time it's at the Australian Museum as part of Science Week. So we're getting ready for that. We have a bed of nails, and we do optical illusions and spoon bending. And Maynard, the bed of nails, as listeners know from last year, what happens is I lie on the bed of nails. Maynard then stands on top of me and plays his trombone. But that's enough from me right now. I'm going to run downstairs, try to beat the cats to the fridge or the cupboard. They're getting quite big, the Skeptic Zone cats, Henrietta and Maud. This is amazing how quickly kittens grow. It really is. I think I'll run downstairs, beat them to the fridge. What will I have? I'll have some nice chicken and corn soup. With some crusty toast. Well, I'm enjoying that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. The Cass Files with Dr. Cassandra Perryman.
This is Dr. Cassandra Perryman, and today on the Cass Files, we're going to discuss the mind part of the mind-body wallet. As skeptics, we're trained to look at the medical woo, the conspiracy theory woo, and, well, for some of us, even the flat earth woo. But what about psychological woo? Poor treatment, both medically and psychologically, greatly affects an individual's quality of life and can be blatantly dangerous. So, could you recognize, then, a psychological woo as readily and easily as you recognize a medical woo? One that probably jumps to mind, if any jump to mind at all, is mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is a type of CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT is efficacious, has been researched for quite a long time, and is an umbrella term. Generally, under CBT, there's a cognitive triad. There's this negative view of self, negative view of the future, and negative view of the world. This triad, then, leads to a negative self-schema, and the purpose of the therapy is to adjust this negative triad. Mindfulness, on the other hand, has drawn in concepts from Buddhism. Instead of focusing on the cognitive triad, they focus on the being mode. The being mode stresses the idea of living and being in the now. This is thought to allow the individual to have a more flexible and accepting mindset, as opposed to somebody who is past or future-oriented, which leads to a more rigid mindset. This perspective of the being mode is based on the Buddhist concept of metacognition, and especially the ability to de-center. The core clinical practice, then, is what's called the 3-minute breathing space. This kind of therapy is typically group administered, which is not bad in and of itself. These sessions are typically about 2 hours, plus there's homework, some all-day workshops, some workbooks. And it can be administered by a clinician, but is typically and, readily administered by a life coach. The difference between a clinician and a life coach being that a clinician will have a postgraduate degree in psychology and a life coach can train online. Now, you've probably all come across at least the commercialized version of mindfulness in these adult meditative coloring books. The question is, then, does it work? Well, the coloring books, certainly not, and only invest in them if you like coloring. But what about the therapy? Well, research has shown that it doesn't work any better than medication, and certainly not any better than actual CBT. And because it's group-based, any sort of effect that can be seen can't be sorted out between what's the therapy and what is just group and social support. What's the harm, then? Well, improper treatment is dangerous and unethical. Mindfulness doesn't teach you how to change your self-schema and your internal dialogue. Rather, it tells you that you should accept and act in spite of it to achieve your goals. You're taught to accept suffering and accept pain and to embrace the now experience, even if it is harmful or painful. Some practitioners go as far as saying happiness is a trap, primarily just because it's a cognitive construct and schema. What if the problem, then, that the person is facing is their negative self-schema, not their ability to work in spite of it? Not having a properly treated negative self-schema leads to increased depression, increased stress, and increased anxiety. So how exactly did mindfulness help the person? Now, one of the big red flags for mindfulness is, well, that it's based on Buddhism. Nothing inherently wrong, I suppose, with Buddhism, but it's definitely not a psychological therapy. So that's it for now. Beware, when you're going to your next Mind, Body, Wallet festival, realize that the mind they're talking about is mindfulness.
Hey, Richard.
Oh, hi, Trish. Would you like a coffee?
Yeah, thanks. What are you working on?
I'm trying to come up with a new promo to play on the Skeptic Zone.
Who's it for?
The Good Thinking Society in the UK. You know, Michael Marshall, Simon Singh, Laura Thomas and that crowd.
Oh, yeah, I know them. They've been doing some great work investigating veterinary homeopathy.
Veterinary homeopathy? What, you sugar pills for cows?
I know, right? And also they're looking at some of the dodgy medical advice given by UK chiropractors.
I'll mention all that in the promo. Now, their website is goodthinkingsociety.org.
And they've recently been reporting on the resurgence of faith healer Peter Popoff.
Peter Popoff. Great. Okay, look, thanks for that. It gives me something good to think about. Ah, yes, that music. Now, some of you will know that music very well. It comes from a series of movies made in the 30s and the 40s starring Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson and Basil Rathbone, the incomparable Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes. Now, I grew up watching these movies that were sort of played not too late at night. I remember in the school holidays. I seem to remember in the late 70s we would watch those, and we loved them as kids. We thought they were just wonderful. And for me, Basil Rathbone is Sherlock Holmes. I mean, I like the others. I like every interpretation of Sherlock Holmes. I think I'm a big fan. But for me, because of the early introduction, I think Basil Rathbone really is Sherlock Holmes. If you haven't seen his movies, his Sherlock Holmes movies, they're all on YouTube. Whether they're out of copyright or not. In fact, some of them are in the public domain, I've discovered, which is interesting. A quick look on YouTube, Basil Rathbone, Sherlock Holmes, or Sherlock Holmes 1939 movies, you'll find them. And if you haven't seen them, or if you know people of the younger generation who haven't seen them, grab some popcorn, set up your TV, and watch one. One of my favourites is called Terror by Night. I mean, they're a bit corny, yes. They're only an hour, roughly an hour long, these movies. There are, I think, 14 in the series, which is great fun. And a lot of them are actually set during World War II, with Sherlock Holmes battling Nazi infiltrators and secret weapons and all this sort of stuff. But yes, what great fun. But the reason I'm discussing this is I was watching one the other night, as I like to do occasionally, and one I haven't seen for many years, in fact, many years, because there's a wonderful little piece in it where Sherlock Holmes is talking about being a skeptic. Now, this isn't from an original Arthur Conan Doyle story, but that's okay. So what I like to do now is play a few minutes from The Scarlet Claw, 1944, starring Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes, Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson, and in this clip you'll also hear Paul Kavanagh playing Lord Penrose.
Lord William Penrose. Yes, he's addressing a meeting of the Royal Canadian Occult Society at the Quebec Hotel.
Gentlemen, as you know, the greatest obstacle in proving the authenticity of the occult lies in finding facts. However, if the facts are there, even the most hardened skeptic, provided it has an open mind, must finally acknowledge the actual existence of the supernatural. Do you admit that, Mr. Holmes?
Facts are always convincing, Lord Penrose. It's the conclusions drawn from facts that are frequently in error.
Yes, in the case of the Hound of the Baskervilles, as well as in the adventure of the Sussex Empire, we found
Watson, please.
Oh, sorry.
Well, gentlemen, this time I have facts. Cold facts. Many years ago, 100 to be exact, an apparition appeared at night in the village now called La Mort Rouge. The following morning, 3 people were found dead, their throats torn out, hence the town's rather grim name.
Interesting, yes. But facts? No. I hardly think the tales of superstitious peasants can be considered...
I haven't finished, Mr. Holmes. La Mort Rouge has again been the scene of these strange and unexplainable occurrences. Unexplainable, that is, from your point of view. Several of our most responsible citizens have actually seen the strange apparition on the marshes at night. And next morning, sheep were discovered...
with their throats torn out and no traces of the killer anywhere to be found.
Oh, you read about it in the papers.
Oh, as a matter of fact, I haven't. It was merely a deduction. A rather obvious one, I'm afraid. Deductions are a weakness of mine, as Dr. Watson can tell you.
Would you believe it? Holmes can...
Well, those are facts, Mr. Holmes. Ignore them if you can.
I never ignore facts, Lord Penrose. And I have no doubt that the incident of the sheep with their throats torn out is unquestionably a fact. However, the interpretation of this fact as being final proof of the existence of the supernatural is merely supposition, and therefore cannot be accepted without further data.
Your opinions, Mr. Holmes, are undoubtedly the result of your inability to cope with something beyond the realm of your comprehension. I'm sorry, John, but this ridiculous skepticism...
I'm afraid, Lord
Penrose... quite understandable, Sir John. Lord Penrose is deeply entrenched in his beliefs. That's his privilege.
Oh, hang it all, Holmes, the fellow was positively rude.
Well, shall we see a little overwrought, Watson?
Well, what a great little clip that was from The Scarlet Claw, also known as Sherlock Holmes and The Scarlet Claw, from 1944. And don't you just love that name, the Royal Canadian Occult Society? Again, if you haven't seen those movies from the 30s and the 40s starring Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes and Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson, you might want to check them out, and maybe you'll get a lot of enjoyment, as I have over the years. And it's no surprise a character like Sherlock Holmes would be a strong skeptic.
This is Carrie Poppy.
I'm Ross Blotcher.
Oh, hey, Ross.
Hey, we're from a podcast called
Oh No, Ross and Carrie.
We find out what happens when you show up and ask questions.
We've hung out with the Kabbalists.
The Mormons.
We've gone and gotten ear candles.
Gone to the Sikhs.
We show up so you don't have to.
So find out where we're going next.
We'll even have special episodes where we have famous guests like Brian Dalton from Mr. Deity.
You heard that awesome theme music? He wrote that.
You should come visit us at onopodcast.com or
facebook.com/onrack.
What the hell's OnRack, Ross?
ONRAC.
Oh no, Ross and Carrie.
That's our show.
That's so smart. Come join us.
From the website of Australian Skeptics, skeptics.com.au, written by Tim Mendham, published on the 30th of June 2016. Chiropractor Floreani embroiled in fake gynaecologist case. Simon Floreani, anti-vaccine chiropractor and former president of the Chiropractors Association of Australia, has been named in court for referring one of his patients to a, quote, fake gynaecologist, end quote. And as an aside, and as listeners to the Skeptic Zone will be fully aware of, I'm sure, that many chiropractors, not all of course, but many chiropractors, in this country at least, seem to be anti-vaccination. We read on. The patient was one of several who were allegedly sexually assaulted by the self-professed IVF specialist Rafael Di Polo. Floreani, pictured on the page, by the way, with his wife, and anti-vaccination campaigner Andrew Wakefield, was treating the woman for infertility despite this being outside a chiropractor's area of competence, and in breach of the Chiropractic Board's Code of Conduct and several warnings from the board. After Floreani had failed to help the woman fall pregnant by performing chiropractic, quote, adjustments, end quote, on her, he referred her to Di Polo, a homeopath who posed as a fertility expert. According to a report in the Age newspaper, Di Polo supposedly earned more than $342,000 between 2006 and 2015, offering fertility treatments under the guise of being a medical practitioner. And as another aside, we often hear the term being bandied around, healthcare professional, which reminds me of this, in this situation, a lot of people with no qualifications, or what we wouldn't call real qualifications, still like to call themselves healthcare professionals. We read on. Floreani and his chiropractor wife, Jennifer Burnham Floreani, have a long history of anti-vaccination and other non-evidence-based activism. They are regular presenters and attendees at the annual Californian Jam Chiropractic event in the US, appearing with other anti-vaccination activists such as Wakefield and Sherry Tenpenny. In July 2014, Floreani and 3 other chiropractors at his Vitality business were cautioned with having anti-vaccination paraphernalia in the Melbourne business's waiting room. Another aside, Vitality business. Vitality reminds me of the word wellness. We sort of call these words weasel words. That means words that sound like they mean something that really don't. Vitality, wellness. Another advertiser I know of uses the word zest. Take this pill to bring the zest back. We read on. In March 2016, it was revealed that Floreani had sneaked into a Melbourne hospital in 2000 to treat a patient with a severe spinal injury. Floreani told the hospital that he was the patient's snowboard coach. No wonder he had a spinal injury. Floreani's Facebook profile still features several videos in which he claims to treat colic and other conditions in babies. These conditions were recently cited by the Chiropractic Board of Australia as breaches of advertising guidelines. His activity has been referred to the board for action. And thanks to Professor Ken Harvey and blogger Reasonable Hank for the information for this article, which you can read at www.skeptics.com.au. And as a last aside, this reminds me of a conversation I had not so long ago with a friend of mine, an occasional acquaintance who was not aware that chiropractic was more or less based in nonsense and non-scientific ideas, non-evidence-based, we might say. And it's very difficult for somebody who doesn't know that to accept that cold when you tell them. And I can understand that. Many people you know probably, consider chiropractic to be a special form of medicine, a speciality, so to speak. So when you suggest to them it's not, well, of course, people get confused. And it was put to me something that the skeptics hear quite a lot, which is called begging the question. It was put to me, well, if chiropractic doesn't work, how come so many people are cured by it? It's very hard to then unravel that. Especially when you're just having a chat to a friend. It's difficult. Sometimes skeptics have a difficult job in explaining these things because there's a lot of unraveling to do. And sometimes that doesn't go very far because people get offended or confused, or they'll get short with you. I've not yet found an eloquent way to convey all this stuff quickly. Maybe there's not. Maybe there's none. It's also the same argument comes up with homeopathy. If homeopathy doesn't work, how come so many people get better by using it? Then you have to unravel that and explain, begging the question. But that doesn't get you very far sometimes. And finally, this same friend was not aware at all, was simply not aware that when you buy a bottle of homeopathic pills or liquid, there's actually nothing in it. And that can be, pardon the analogy or the pun, that can be hard to swallow for a lot of people. When you suggest to them or tell them that a homeopathic preparation does not have ingredients in it, it's very confusing, and a lot of people won't accept it when you say that because it sounds so ridiculous it can't possibly be true. Again, it can't possibly be true because people get better by using it and they come back to begging the question. Not always easy, my friends. Not always easy. But thanks again to Tim Mendham, Professor Ken Harvey, and Reasonable Hank for putting that information together at skeptics.com.au. Australian Skeptics National Convention 2016 will be hosted in Melbourne at the University of Melbourne from the 25th to the 27th of November, with the annual dinner being held at Melbourne Zoo on the evening of the 26th of November. Early bird ticket sales are online at the convention website convention.skeptics.com.au, and if you get an early bird ticket, you'll receive a discount and be able to reserve seats close to the stage. We can confirm that speakers for the convention will include Lawrence Krauss, Edzard Ernst, Harriet Hall, Michael Marshall, Katie Mack, and Mel Thompson, with many more great speakers to be announced soon. Nicholas J. Johnson is our MC for the annual dinner. Information about our speakers is available from the convention website. So that's convention.skeptics.com.au.
This is Lauren Cochrane with an article from The Telegraph by Sarah Napton. Vets are calling for a ban on homeopathy for pets, claiming animals cannot benefit from the placebo effect because they are unaware that they are being treated. Danny Chambers, who teaches at the University of Edinburgh, said that homeopathy has no basis in science and prevents the use of orthodox remedies, which can lead to unnecessary suffering and even death. More than 1,000 vets have now signed a petition started by Mr. Chambers, which calls on the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons to prohibit homeopathic treatments. Writing in New Scientist, he said, "Amazingly, it is still offered and promoted by a small number of vets in the UK. This is plain weird when you think about it. Animals do not experience a placebo effect because they are unaware that they are being treated. Vets who practice homeopathy should not be permitted to use their professional standing to promote its validity. They should not be allowed to charge a fee for something that has been proven to be ineffective. This line must be drawn. After all, no one would argue that vets should be permitted to offer crystal healing or psychic healing. Let's stop vets from prescribing homeopathic treatments, sending a clear message that these are not endorsed by 21st century medicine." Supporters of homeopathy believe it can treat everything from depression to hay fever, the theory being that substances that produce the symptoms of an ailment can cure it once they've been watered down many times to reduce their strength. Advocates of the practice claim the water retains a memory of the original substance. The Prince of Wales recently announced that he uses homeopathy on his cattle. But critics say the only benefits are in the mind, with a Lancet study concluding that homeopathy was no more effective than the standard sugar pill given as a placebo in clinical trials. In 2010, the Science and Technology Committee agreed that there was no evidence the drugs were any more effective than a placebo. The Chief Medical Officer, Dame Sally Davies, has also said that homeopathy is rubbish. Most NHS trusts no longer fund homeopathic treatments, which do not include complementary therapies such as acupuncture. but there are at least 46 practices across Britain which still offer treatment. Mr. Chambers added, "The danger is not only due to the remedies being ineffective, but the belief held by some homeopaths that such therapies can be a substitute for orthodox treatment. This is at best misleading, and at worst may lead to unnecessary suffering or death. Substituting effective and appropriate treatment with homeopathy for serious diseases, such as hypothyroidism in a cat, could result in a personal tragedy for the owner of a much-loved pet. Allowing a small minority of vets to continue prescribing homeopathic remedies adds legitimacy to a pseudoscience that may lead to belief that it is a genuinely effective medicine." However, a spokesman for the British Association of Homeopathic Veterinary Surgeons said that people who opposed homeopathy had an axe to grind. "The Royal Society of Veterinary Surgeons has made it clear that homeopathic treatment is an acceptable type of therapy when practiced by trained vets. You only have to look on our website and you will see examples of where dogs have been cured of cancer through homeopathy. By and large, people who oppose it just have an axe to grind."
Continuing on with homeopathy, this story comes to us from Medical Daily at medicaldaily.com. Alternative medicine, homeopathy remedies, no more effective than placebo sugar pills. By Lisette Borelli. Every year during the flu or allergy season, we see dozens of people lined up outside health stores looking for healing alternatives to traditional medicine. Despite homeopathy's questionable reputation, 3.3 million Americans have spent about $3 billion on homeopathic remedies. This begs the question, could homeopathy hold the key to the future of medicine, or is it just quackery? In the latest Reactions video, a series by the American Chemical Society, scientists have shown while homeopathy has been around for about 200 years, science has progressed and gradually attempted to undermine the three foundations of this alternative medicine. Quote, "Homeopathic medicines are based on a few theories of disease distinct from conventional medicine," end quote, according to Reactions. The most popular of these theories is like cures like. The principle behind this belief is we can cure what ails us with the exact thing that ails us. The idea is if something gives us a rash, the same thing can be used to treat the rash. German doctor Samuel Hahnemann, who first coined the term homeopathy in 1807, believed when a substance in larger doses causes certain symptoms, in small doses it can cure those same symptoms. For example, a homeopathic remedy for sleeping difficulty is coffee cruda, very diluted amounts of unroasted coffee beans. Dilution, reducing, and concentrating of something is the second principle of homeopathy. Hahnemann thought a sick person only needed a very small amount of an active ingredient to cure their ailments. He used a dilution scale that increased by factors of 100, a scale denoted by the letter C. The C is usually seen on a homeopathic label. So typically when it comes to making coffee cruda, put 1 drop in a vial containing 9 drops of water, then take a drop from that vial and put it into another vial with 9 drops of water 60 times. However, by the 60th vial, we would have diluted your coffee so much that there isn't any left. Statistically speaking, beyond the dilution of 13C, researchers have zero chance of finding a single molecule of the active ingredients in the vial. However, during his time, the concept of atoms and molecules as fundamental units of matter wasn't really developed. Hahnemann didn't know we could dilute something until it's effectively gone. Lastly, the third principle of homeopathy is water can somehow remember what has dissolved in it and pass the effects of those absent molecules onto us. However, there has been no evidence for this phenomenon, which goes against the principles of physical science. In a 2015 report from the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council, researchers reviewed the results of about 200 studies on the effectiveness of homeopathy. After looking at the evidence, they concluded homeopathic remedies are no better than a sugar pill or a placebo. The studies that did show the benefits of homeopathy had flawed methodologies. Further, the United States National Institutes of Health states, quote, several key concepts of homeopathy are inconsistent with the fundamental concepts of chemistry and physics. There are significant challenges in carrying out rigorous clinical research on homeopathic remedies, end quote. It seems the idea to cure what ails us with whatever ails us isn't foolproof after all. And that report comes to us from Medical Daily at medicaldaily.com. Quackwatch, your guide to quackery, health fraud, and intelligent decisions, operated by Stephen Barrett, MD. Quackwatch is now an international network of people who are concerned about health-related frauds, myths, fads, fallacies, and misconduct. Its primary focus is on quackery-related information that is difficult or impossible to get elsewhere. Articles on quackery include quackery. How should it be defined? How it sells. 26 ways to spot it. How it harms cancer patients. 7 warning signs for bogus science. Why health professionals become quacks, and many more, including in-depth looks at acupuncture, chiropractic, homeopathy, naturopathy, and much more. Visit www.quackwatch.com. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you to those people, those new people, new to the fold, so to speak. Over the last couple of weeks, the numbers are really skyrocketing. Thank you very much. I think that's largely due to me being on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast a few weeks ago and passing the 400 episodes for the Skeptic Zone. But welcome all the new listeners, and thank you. Some of those new listeners indeed have signed up to the Patreon, Skeptic Zone Patreon, to become patrons of the Skeptic Zone. I appreciate that very much, and I've sent out a few goodies to some people who have just signed up. Thank you. I'm sure you'll enjoy the DVD and the signed goodies from James Randi in the folded origami flying pig. And if you want to be a patron of the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or just simply via PayPal micropayments, visit skepticzone.tv. And also the Skeptic Zone is available through Stitcher and TuneIn, the popular radio app. Coming up on the Skeptic Zone, I don't know. I think we'll have to use our predictions. We'll try to predict who the next Prime Minister of Australia will be. I predict it'll be, I'm not even going there. We have no idea. Me. Yeah, I might have a go at folks. Maynard for Prime Minister. I like that idea even better. But anyway, for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for contacts, an archive of all episodes since 2008, and our online store. Please support the Skeptic Zone by following us on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, liking us on Facebook, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can also show your support by subscribing via PayPal for as little as 99 cents a week. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics Inc. or any other skeptical organisation.